Jacques from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch. And this is a big week. Of course, we're right in the middle of the Hour of Devastation set review. Yesterday we did the white cards. Later today you're going to see all the blue cards. We're going to continue to work on that as the week goes on. Now, typically when I'm working on these set reviews, I skip the market watch for that weekend, but I think we're at a point where a lot of players do rely on this video every week to kind of keep in touch with what's happening in the market, so I wanted to still try to force it out anyway. So I worked hard to work this into the schedule, and I definitely think that's the right way to go. Now, quickly before we get started though, if you check out the description below, you'll find a couple ways to help support us, one of which is our Amazon affiliate store. If you make any purchases there, a small percentage will come back to help support the channel. Secondly, you'll also find our Patreon page linked below as well. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the cards for today. We're going to look at Standard, Modern, and Legacy as we always do. And we're also going to do a quick Commander look at a few Commander singles that are actually hot right now due to the card you see on the screen currently, Solemnity. So more on that later, but let's get into the cards, starting with Standard. And we'll begin with the top 5 cards that have lost value this week. And you'll see a lot of the usual suspects here. Coming in number 5, Gideon of the Trials, down 43 cents to $10.99. Of course, Gideon's been following pretty steadily ever since his release. Coming in at number 4, Kalatos, Trader of Get, down 45 cents to $14.35. And it's important to note, even though this card is down week to week, it actually has gone up in the last 24 hours or so. And yeah, Hour of Devastation is bringing some more support to zombies, and maybe could revive that archetype a little bit. And regardless of whether that's the case or not, I'm still pretty confident Kalatos is going to find a home as long as he's legal in the meta. Coming in number 3, Aetherworks Marvel, down 85 cents to $4.47. Of course, this was banned a few weeks ago and it's been dropping relatively steady ever since. Although the drop hasn't been very dramatic due to the fact that it still sees play in places like Commander, still a good card. Coming in at number 2 is Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, down 94 cents to $15.99. Now, there are some Planeswalker Hose cards coming out in Hour of Devastation. And also, too, Gideon has been a force in the meta pretty much since he premiered. But his time in Standard is coming to a close. I mean, he has one more full meta, and I wouldn't count him out yet. I mean, this card always seems to find a way to come through and be a big part of at least one deck at any given time. So I do think even with some hate cards running against this, Gideon probably still going to be a pretty decent card. However, you do have to take note that this is really Gideon's last meta in Standard, so a lot of players are going to be thinking about moving on, and there's a lot of copies of this floating around. So because of that, I don't really see Gideon reaching its peak of $20–$25 again, but it could stabilize maybe around the $15 point. Coming in number 1, Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, down $2.12 this week to $16.70. This is the card that really took the biggest hit from the banning of Aetherworks Marvel. Alright, let's move on to the cards that have gained value this week, and really for the 3rd or 4th week in a row now, we're seeing very, very modest gains in Standard. It's very slow as players are going to wait and see what's going to happen with this metagame now that Hour of Devastation will be coming out in another week or so. Sheltered Thicket, up 12 cents to $2.99, and this is an interesting one. It definitely is seeing play in Standard and like energy decks, but it's also seeing play in other formats. It's showing up in some modern decks like Dredge, for example, as well as Titan Shift. It's showing up in Legacy Lands decks. It's kind of interesting to see how some of these other formats are absorbing these cycling lands. Coming in number 4, Bristling Hydra, up 14 cents to $1.42. This has been one of the energy cards in the 2 main energy decks, Temur and Golgari. Number 3, Collective Brutality, up 18 cents to $10. Now, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. Collective Brutality is going to be a big card in the future. It's a modern staple at this point. It's in a ton of different modern decks, and now, of course, black is a very powerful color right now in the modern format. But regardless of that, there's just a lot of different decks running this card. That's a formula for success long term. It's not seeing a whole lot of Standard play right now, which is interesting, but definitely fills a niche in Modern. On top of that, this comes from Eldritch Moon, which is a set that did not get printed as heavily as most other Modern era Magic sets. A couple of reasons for this. One of which, it didn't have chase cards. So if you don't have the masterpieces to encourage people to open more packs, then That means less packs get open, less packs get sold. Secondly, it was right in the middle of that summer of sets. As a matter of fact, it was bumped up against Eternal Masters of all things. So players just didn't have the resources to go out and buy packs of this as much as maybe they normally would have. And because of that, the rares and mythics you see in this set definitely have some long-term potential, and this one may be one of the best. Coming in at number 2 is Nahiri the Harbinger, and she's up 18 cents this week to $14.79. She's not seeing as much modern play as she was seeing at one point, but still a little bit here and there, sometimes in like Boros Prison decks, but she is seeing standard play in Mardu vehicles. And coming in at number 1, Walking Ballista, up 22 cents this week to $11.70. So right there, that sums up the whole week for standard. I mean, our biggest climbing card is 22 cents. It's really slow right now, so kind of is what it is. Walking Ballista, another card that's seeing play in multiple formats, including vintage and workshop decks. All right, let's move on to Modern, and there's actually some interesting things going on right now in Modern. There is a twist on an old deck, a twist on Through the Breach that's using Dubious Challenge. This caught a lot of players' attention, and it was kind of pushed into the spotlight by players like Jeff Hoagland, who's been playing it on YouTube and streaming it, as well as Saffron Olive, who's done a deck list of the deck. It's a little different than Jeff's, but similar in most ways. So because of that, there's a lot of cards, especially when we get to the plus value, that are being impacted by that. So keep that in mind. I'll point those out as we go through, but let's look at the cards that lost value first. Number 5, maybe a little surprising, is Through the Breach. Out of all the cards that we'll be talking about today, this one is down $2.05 to $47.42. Now, granted, you may argue that $50 is a pretty high price point for Through the Breach, especially considering it could see a reprint within these next 2 Magic Masters sets that are coming out, including Iconic Masters and Magic 25. But aside from that, it is a card that is still seeing a lot of play, and I feel like it's going to see more play potentially in the future. So I think this is a blip on the radar. I feel like this will be going back up next week. Number 4, Linvala, Keeper of Silence from Rise of the Eldrazi, down $2.11 this week to $21.87. Number 3 is Noble Hierarch from Conflux, down $2.30 to $65.92. Another card that desperately needs a reprint, and I would be very surprised if it does not get a reprint in one of these next 2 Master sets, and we can only hope that it stays at rare. Number 2, Street Wraith, down $2.31 to $9.95. This is the original Future Sight version of the card. It's been spiking recently, so this is kind of like normal stabilization. Coming in number 1, Living End, down $2.32 to $23.69 this week. Still a very popular card. I mean, Living End decks are still definitely a thing in Modern. It feels like the spotlight kind of moved off them a little bit since GP Vegas. This card was very hot going into that GP, but I feel like a lot of players now are looking at the Grixis Death Shadow or even Dredge. Alright, let's move on to the cards that have gained value this week. Coming in number 5 is Mox Opal, up $2.26 this week to $59.99. This is the Scars of Mirrodin version, and this card has been going down over the last few weeks. I think the main reason for that is simply that Lantern control decks are taking up a little bit less percentage of the field than they were, but Affinity had a great showing at GP Las Vegas, so that's going to help boost this card if nothing else. Coming in number 4, Chalice of the Void. Yeah, it's back again. This card just keeps going up. Modern Masters version up $3.13 to $79.99, with the Mirrodin version up $6.47 to $87.97. This card is just completely out of control at this point. Every week it's on the list. And financially, it certainly wasn't hurt by the fact that Jeff Hoagland was running 4 of these in his Through the Breach Dubious Challenge build. Horizon Canopy at number 3, up $8.19 to $90.42. Another great utility card for Modern, and guess what? Jeff Hoagland's build was running 3 of these. Coming in number 2, Goryo's Vengeance. You probably see where I'm going with this. Up $13.87 to $46.53. Again, another card that's included in these Dubious Challenge builds. And this one, actually, I feel like has been undervalued for a while. Like, I feel like this should have been more comparable with Through the Breach. They work well in tandem. And Through the Breach has been $50 for a while. This card's been under. Well, those days are over. Now, granted, it probably will snap back a little bit, but it's not going to go back down to where it was prior to this spike. And coming in at number 1, Thoughtseize from Lorwyn. Still a huge card. This has been another one that's been spiking quite frequently. Up $15.27 to $51.74. It's simply because this card is just seeing a lot of play in Modern, a lot of different places. It's really the best card in Modern that does this type of thing. And a lot of people are gravitating towards the original version of the card, the original art. And as a matter of fact, Lorwyn had a very low print run when you consider Modern era Magic. All right, let's move into Legacy, and we'll start off with the cards that lost value this week. Legacy's pretty slow this week. You'll notice it's just some back and forth stabilization, a lot of the usual cards. Coming in number 5, Tropical Island from Unlimited, down 1287 to 369.97. Number 4, Plateau from Unlimited, down 1598 to 159.98. Diamond Valley, down 1608 this week to 176.48. Card usually sticks around the 200 mark. I expect it to kind of stay there. Number 2, Drop of Honey. This continues to drop after it had its spike a couple weeks ago, down 1750 to 362.50. And coming in at number 1, the Tabernacle of Pendrell Vale, also down this week, $22.45 to $1,253.60. All right, let's look at the cards that have gained value this week. Coming in number 5 is Moat, up $12.35 to $592.59. Card is again creeping close to $600. Coming in number 4, Bayou from Unlimited, up $21.20 to $284.99. Number 3 is City of Brass from Arabian Nights, up $22.11 to $137.99. Now, of course, this is not a reserve list card. There have been reprintings of this. You can get it much cheaper, obviously. But right now, I'll tell you, Arabian Nights cards are just extremely hot right now, and a lot of collectors want to pick them up. Also, if you're in the 93-94 format, then this is the version of the card you'll pick up. Coming in at number 2 is Volcanic Island from Unlimited, up $22.90 to $471.48. And finally, at number 1, Ali from Cairo's, up $32.88 this week to $94.99. This card's been dropping the last couple weeks, and I have been saying, if you can find this for a price point between like $40, $60, which is about where it was at, pick it up, because even though it's not a great card, it is a big part of Magic's history, and it looks like some folks are taking advantage of it and starting to pick it up as it creeps back up towards $100. Alright, so let's talk about some notable Commander cards this week. And like I said at the top of the video, these are all tied into one card, one Hour of Devastation card. And that's Solemnity. Right now you can pick this up around $5 if you pre-order it, which actually feels reasonable considering the hype around this card, especially when it comes to Commander. But basically, I've talked about this card a lot in other videos. I don't want to waste too much time. You probably heard it before. But quickly, I'll say this. On one hand, it hoses a lot of stuff, but on the other hand, the card also enables a lot of interesting strategies. Things like persist counters not appearing on your persist creatures, for example. That could be real good, right? But there's so much more it can do, and the secondary market is certainly taking notice. One thing I do want to say before I go on and look at some of the other cards that are already being impacted by this is that there is some rules confusion around this card. I know a lot of people read this and interpret it as if a card is coming into the battlefield with counters on it, that they would still get their counters, it's just you couldn't place counters on something anymore. That's actually not the way the rules interpret the card. Because of state-based effects, what happens is, say Thing in the Ice, for example. If you play that, yes, it should be coming in with counters, but state-based effects will check, and because this says they can't have counters, they won't have counters. Now, in that case, with Thing in the Ice, you still have to cast another instant or sorcery to flip it, because that's the way it's worded. But you won't have to contend with the counters, which is pretty interesting. So, keeping that in mind, let's look at some of these other cards that this card is impacting. First off, we have Decree of Silence, down $1.85 this week to $4.33. But about 2 weeks ago, this was about a $1 card. So even though it is starting to snap back a little bit from some price adjustment, still gone up quite a bit percentage-wise since this Solemnity was actually revealed. So, yeah, read the card, definitely you can see why this would be appealing to some Commander players. Next we have Glacial Chasm, and again this week it's down $2.31 to $5.03, but again a couple weeks ago you could pick this up for $1 or $2. So why is this one impacted? Well, Cumulative Upkeep got a rules revision when Cold Snap came out, and they created something called age counters to help you keep track of this upkeep. Well, guess what? If you can't put age counters on the card, you kind of nullify the whole cumulative upkeep deal. So that has caught a lot of people's attention. So cards like this definitely are starting to see a little bit of movement in the secondary market. Mystic Remora, another example of that. This is from Ice Age, up 79 cents to $2.49. And we'll do one more. Phyrexian Soul Gorger, card from Cold Snap, up $1.26 this week to $3.15. Now, there's a lot of cards that Solemnity combos with, so it'd be probably a really long video if I try to go through what's going on with all of them, obviously. But use your imagination, think about things. You may think of things a lot of players haven't thought of, but if you're a commander player especially, and you're thinking of maybe playing with that card in a deck, try to get ahead of the market a little bit on some of these combos, because especially once the card comes out, I do think some of these combos will start to light up. So having said that, until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.